your flesh and blood.
Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, and be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. I am Richard Dugan, your host, and we are here with a very special guest to talk about becoming an expert. I don't know if she's an expert. We'll find out when we start talking with Rhea Wessel. She's going to share with us about how to write like a thought leader. Rhea, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Richard. Pleased to be here.
It's interesting how here's a prime example of non-experts. You remember on March 17th, 2020, when the government decided to shut down the country and we were all to stay home and work from home and so forth. It was amazing to me how many people in the media immediately had their degrees in biochemistry and all of the other sciences surrounding the coronavirus, or COVID-19, if you will. It would absolutely astounded me how much these people knew. And really all they were doing was reading from maybe what they Googled. But they weren't experts. First of all, because the thought leader part intrigues me to no end. But you also talk about becoming an expert. What do you consider in this context of our conversation? What do you consider to be an expert?
Okay. There's natures of expertise, different types of expertise. Some expertise is won through experience. Some is won through education. Some is won through insight. And what I talk about is thought leadership based on expertise. So not going out there and saying, I'm going to position myself as an expert, but say I'm going to position myself as a thought leader because I already am an expert. So in our workshops, for instance, for Harvard alumni, entrepreneurs, and so forth, and for scientists, I work for scientists, I show a Venn diagram that helps people understand what is their thought leadership niche. And so if I were coaching you, I would ask you, like, what is it that you know a lot about that is important to your audience? And this can be, again, something you got a PhD in or not, something that you just love and have studied for years and are intrigued. But I ask the participants or the people I'm working with to find that subject matter, okay? And then it's not going to be relevant whether you have the prestigious degree or not. Just what is that? The second component is having a passion and purpose around this body of knowledge. And finally, you need to have a unique viewpoint on it. So that, and where those three come together, that is your thought leadership niche. So only one component is the expertise part. But I'm not saying go out and be an expert if you're not, but you're not a thought leader if you already have that expertise. That could be a part of your business model. So
Okay.
that's how I distinguish the two.
I would consider myself an expert. Maybe I could put it in this kind of broadcasting. I've been doing this for over 45 years. I think I know a little something, but I take it to a higher level. And I wish I did have a PhD in this, although I don't know how much that would really, how relevant it would be. In eclectic studies, I've been doing this for 45 years. I've not only produced as well as interviewed hundreds, if not thousands of people, produced hundreds. Well, actually, my boss and I did a calculation over the 45 years. I've probably produced, outside of my own programs, probably 60 to 70,000 programs of a wide variety of subjects, incredible guests and conversations. So, eclectic studies, I'm not sure if that really means anything. But and I've actually sat in on a defense of one's thesis. A friend of mine who got her PhD, I thought it was a weird way to phrase it. I mean, I have to defend my thesis now. I mean, I've written it and I've gotten all the help from my mentors and so on and so forth, and now I have to defend it, which stands to reason, because if you really want that PhD and you really want to show that you know what you're talking about. It's kind of like coming on this program. And oh, by the way, Ray, at the beginning of this program, I just want to remind you, I will leave out all of the questions regarding nuclear physics. Okay, just so you don't feel nervous, because I know, yeah, or aerodynamics, those kinds of things. Yeah, I'll only ask you about what you know about, and that is kind of what defending one's thesis is all about. When you talk about thought leaders, are there individuals? Now, I could name a few people I think are thought leaders, but I'm not 100% certain. I mean, some, and I know that everyone's going to have their own list. Some are going to agree, some are going to disagree. I think of Greg Braden, we've had on a number of times on this program. I suppose Oprah Winfrey, Lee McTaggart. I have a gentleman I have on regularly. His name is Jonathan Goldman. We talk about sound and so forth and vibration. And the list goes on. What are the first steps that we want to take as an individual to work towards becoming that expert, and also in the category, because it sounds like this is a category, of becoming a thought leader? Mm-hmm. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so the first step is really getting that clarity on the niche, what we already talked about. What is your niche? And it can't be too broad. Like, just being an expert on AI, for instance, since we were chatting about that a little earlier, that is too broad. You need a unique viewpoint. You need a smaller slice. And even, things like supply chains or procurement or things like that, that's way too broad. You've got to niche it down. So you've got to get that clarity, and it has to really resonate with what you love. Otherwise, you're not going to have the stamina to get out there and be talking about this and sharing your knowledge in the way you need to. So that's the step one. And step two is finding how your knowledge serves your audience, and so that you're really externalizing what you know in service of your audience, and that also is part of your business model, right? So you're not out there just teaching. So you gave you're an expert in broadcasting. Well, if you wanted to teach what you know to other broadcasters, that would be an interesting audience, but that might not be the business you want to go into.
Right.
You need to, because you have a wide body of knowledge through all of those interviews and reporting and research that you've done all the years. So you've got to figure out which audience you're going to serve, how you're going to serve them, and how that's going to wind up to be a business model for you.
Yeah.
And often that you need to start publishing right away and framing your articles in a way, framing your stories in a way that helps people solve practical problems. Because when they're scrolling and seeing this wide offering of knowledge, they're looking for that intrigue ping.
Hmm.
Oh, I haven't heard it said that way. Oh, actually, that's, one of the problems I'm solving. So framing your knowledge in stories that are written to solve your audience's problems is a big part of it. And it's a journey, and as you continue, and then you'll also need to build up a community, et cetera, et cetera. So thought leaders are known for what they know. So if there are plenty of hidden experts, and these might be what people you're talking about, the time of COVID, who kind of came out of the woodwork, and they may have been experts, and then there may be some who weren't experts, but many people have a deep knowledge and they're just not known for it. Just, a few people around them appreciate it. And then that's not a thought leader. Thought leaders are known for what they know, and they're out there helping people solve problems. They're generally not people who are disrupting, who are provoking, things like that. It's a business setting. They're there to help people solve practical problems, and they love what they do. So,
Back when I was still living in Phoenix, I actually taught at two different schools of broadcasting and absolutely loved it. It was because I am not a territorial person, especially in the workplace, because I learned very early on that if you're territorial, you're trying to protect your turf, you're not going to share anything with anybody. Because if you do, my gosh, they may learn more than you and take over your job and you're out. And I'm
yeah.
going, consider a different perspective. Share everything. If I could empty out my head of all of that stuff and give it away, guess what? It frees me up to doing other things,
Yeah,
experiencing and learning more.
it's an abundance mindset that you have. And I think that that is really critical for thought leadership, because holding back doesn't work. And you have to give your best ideas and give them up front, outright. You have to give away for free the ideas that you would normally charge for in a consulting session.
Right.
But the reason you're doing it is because you're winning trust. And that's what cannot be bought, right? So you're out there winning trust. And I'll give you an example of how it works. I over the weekend was looking to improve my LinkedIn profile. I came across a person talking about this, was interviewed on a lot of podcasts. I listened to 5 interviews by him and said he knows what he's got talking about. And I signed up for his community over the weekend. And so he built trust. I saw the depth of his knowledge. I looked at his offering and I gave my card, and I never met the guy, right? And so he is a thought leader in his niche, and it works, and it can work. And that's a B2C model, but many thought leaders are in the B2B focus, and they can be employed or they can be individual business owners, but serving other companies and helping organizations solve their problems.
Rhea Wessel's my guest. Her latest offering for us is Write Like a Thought Leader. We're going to talk more about that as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and we are talking about writing like a thought leader, if you will. And it's really funny, too. I had, when I first read all of this information and I first read the title, I'm going, thought leader. Oh, yeah, that's right up my alley. Tell me your story, new paradigms for new world, giving people choices and knowledge of those choices to help make their dreams come true, looking for those new ways of living because the old ways don't work. Just look around you. And there is a certain element of all of that within the context of being a thought leader and writing like one and speaking like one, etc. But my mindset was on the more esoteric, the more spiritual and metaphysical thought leader. I hadn't even considered the possibility that the thought leader could exist in just about every area of our lives, whether it's economy, business, literature, the arts, and the list goes on. And so it's like, okay. Matter of fact, I read one of the comments on one of my videos, commenting to me saying, "Richard, you need to open your mind." And I thought, really? Are you listening to my interviews? Because I've burned down more of my straw huts, okay, than I can shake a stick at. And I'll burn them all down and start over if I have to, because I don't have all the answers. I'm looking like everybody else. And It's interesting because a friend of mine just released his book. It's called something along the lines of Sleepwalking in Certainty. And I'm going, really?
Oh, interesting. That intrigues me.
Yeah, because the philosophy I've lived by is that I was shared with probably when I was in my early 20s was it is better to begin in doubt and end in certainty than begin in certainty and end in doubt.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is where I find a majority of our population, I'll keep it local, specifically here in the United States, everybody is certain about what they believe. The only problem is you can't be certain about a belief because a belief isn't based on fact. And yet people will come across as pseudo experts based upon what they've been told, what they've heard, what they've read, 99% of the time out of an echo chamber, their echo chamber, and so forth. An expert in a thought leader writing about or speaking about their expertise, they can't do that, can they? Because that, in spite of, I'll go ahead and throw out nuclear physics. They may be an expert. They helped to build this power plant or that power plant and so on and so forth. They can come from a perspective of semi-certainty about maybe the science at the present moment. However, because science is, and this has actually been said to me, is an art, and it's ever changing. I mean, we went from physics to quantum physics, right? I don't know what's next. They have to be open to other ideas and ways of thinking because that's what a thought leader does. I mean, they have their thoughts, they express them. You went through the criterion of being a thought leader and an expert, but they also have to be open to consider other possibilities from the outside, other people. But how about this one? From the inside, their intuition, or we talk about it all the time, the still small voice. Can you talk about that?
Well, I do think that anyone who's attracted to thought leadership, yeah, has gone through some sort of personal leadership journey themselves, and they're really wanting to get out there and be heard and serve like that. So I think that they're coming from a place of um, altruism, although it is a business model.
Mhm.
And can you say the question one more time? Because I was kind of latched on to several things you said. Just
Yeah, I do tend to
talk
ask
about the
questions.
question.
I do tend to ask questions that are rather nested, and I apologize for that.
No problem.
But can a thought leader rely exclusively on where they are coming from, or do they need to be open to information and other thoughts from other thought leaders, but also from their own intuition and other, because I personally believe that we can trust our intuition.
Yeah, so I would definitely say yes, intuition is a big part of that. And part of thought leadership is being able to articulate what is um, emerging, but is as yet unarticulated. So these people are feeling and sensing and have their ideas sensors on and for their niche, what I'm talking about. And then they're able to make the idea concrete by naming it before others. And that's gives the reader or the follower that intrigue ping I mentioned, because they're like, oh yeah. Actually, I've been noticing that as well, right? So they're giving name to something that is as yet unarticulated. And I think that that comes from a well of confidence and from and typically that comes from is part of the habit of always checking your own biases, your own belief, and being open for feedback. And it doesn't come across well if you're a know-it-all giving advice and choking it down people's throats. Then you're not going to be found as a thought leader. That's just unfortunate, right? You need to have a humble approach toward the subject matter, and that's actually something that fits nicely here as well. With the scientists I work with, you know, they know so much. And then I ask them, what could your thought leadership niche be? And then they tell me they don't know anything, because they've gone so far down the expertise trail and that they have a respect for what they don't know, right? But if you look at it on a spectrum from the general population, they still know a lot, and we need their ideas and solutions to be part of the public dialogue. But you have a lot of people with the deep expertise there saying, I don't know, because they just know what they don't know, and they're humble about it. And so in terms of my business and how I got into this, I had a couple of incidences where I was speaking to experts and I was fascinated by what they were saying. One was a German engineer named Sasha, who told me everything there is to know about river turbines and how this technology could deliver clean energy in Europe. And I just dug and I dug and I dug, because I've done lots of interviews with Siemens engineers and all kinds of experts. And he was able to answer every question. And I was like, well, what's the problem? Why this is not being taken up in policy? What about the fish? We went all the way through it. And by the end of the conversation, I was, and I'm a journalist as background. So at the end of the conversation, I was just like, well, he knows what he's talking about. Why have I never heard about this? And that happened to me a second time, and I'm just like, whoa, I want to be the person who helps true subject matter experts be heard, right? Because there's a lot of noise out there in the public realm, and there are a lot of people hogging the microphone who actually don't know a lot. They don't have the expertise, right? And then we have true experts who lack the communication skills and can't get them out there. And so I found my spot, my place in helping experts frame their articles and their ideas in a way that make them appealing and understandable, where you don't get bogged down in the complexity. And so I'm like a midwife to your best ideas, right? And then I get my satisfaction because I can help contribute to a more constructive public discourse by helping experts with real knowledge get their interesting solutions out there. And so I found my spot in there. And so now I've got a really nested answer to your nested question.
Touche. By the way, Rhea Wessel is the founder of the Institute for Thought Leadership. InstituteforThoughtLeadership.com is the website, and we will be linked to that website as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and Ray, I want to ask you in regards to this whole aspect of getting the word out. By the way, that is fascinating. And of course, some of the thoughts that came to my mind as you were sharing that story of this gentleman who was talking about these turbines in rivers and so forth, I'm thinking, Yeah, but what about all the garbage that's coming down the rivers that ends up in the oceans and so forth? Not to forget about the fish and so forth. And I'm not asking for an answer. It's just those are the thoughts that start to come up, and I'm sure for you as well. This to me, it's fascinating. How important do you think it is? And this is now bringing into question. I don't want to necessarily use the word ethics, although it might apply. Authenticity more than anything else, or accepted information.
Mhm.
What do you think about the TED Talk concept in terms of experts coming on and having these, what is it, like 15 to 18-minute little videos where they talk about a particular subject in regards, whatever it is?
Mhm.
Do you put much credence into something like that as opposed to, as you use the example of someone just grabbing a microphone and a camera and going on the internet and just blah, 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 blah about what they think or what they believe is the truth and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I do think that vetted expertise is really important. And at the beginning of the TED phenomena, I think that you had a lot of people who were vetted, and then they seemed to, with their TEDx brand extension, it seemed to get easier and easier to have a TED talk.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had non-specialists deciding who gets to go, the license holders. And so I do think that I think it's an interesting format. I think it did a lot. I've watched my share, and I really enjoy using that as part of the research process. I did that more before I could research with AI. Um, but it's now a way of it's flooded the arena basically, but YouTube as
Oversaturation.
well. But I think that, a TED Talk should have more weight than a random YouTube video, theoretically, because
Mhm.
there's been a vetting process or a
Right.
competition of to get
I,
that.
I, I have seen these little short videos on Facebook and other places, even YouTube, where this gentleman comes on and talks about how important it is for you to do a TED talk, because you'll be able to garner 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 in fees for going out and talking and speaking at different at corporate gatherings and on and on and on and on. And I was asking somebody about that in terms of branding and in terms of all of these different aspects of getting your message out and being known as the expert in your field and so forth. What is or are, let's keep it plural because I know there isn't just one, but what are some of the best ways for an individual to get their message out as an expert? I mean, I've written a book, Choices, 5 Steps for Life. And one of my guests, it was beautiful the way she put this. She says you have B and D, birth and death. And between birth and death, you have C, choices. And I thought, I like that. I'm
That's
going
good. I
to
like that,
I'm going to borrow that.
yeah.
You know, but what are some of the best ways that you have found for people? And then we'll talk about strategies and where to begin to
Sure.
build.
To build, and it is, that's the right word. It's build, and it takes a long time, and it's a long-term play. And the way to get found is constantly changing, and will be changing even more as search moves to AI. And so back to what we were saying with the TED Talk, I do think that that is valuable and important. And if you could get a chance, do it. And even if you don't have that many views, the process of writing the speech and performing that will give you a lot of clarity. And I would say, don't do that in isolation. Get yourself a speech writer or a speech coach who's going to help you do that, because you don't want to land that opportunity and then get out there and have your message is off, or everyone else has already said this, things like that. You have to work hard to do that. And the I may do a TED Talk myself at some point. Who knows?
Yeah.
The the you need to meet your audience on the platform where they are. And for many of the people I work with, that is LinkedIn. And it's, it's a bit of a shame because the creator economy is a really tough um, world to be in. So the people who are really creating the ideas and out there coming up with new things have to fight super hard to be found with their creations, and platform owners monetize that, and it's easier for them to monetize that than the actual creator. So I've seen some things like, trying to get a creator business model and not be um, beholden to big tech, not be dependent on big tech to be found, right? So just getting on the first page of Google is very tricky. And it's this is not something I talk about a lot, but it just happens to be top of mind because I went to I saw a professor speak about 2 weeks ago at a press club in Frankfurt where I live, and he talked about this, and I was realized like, oh, that's actually part of the struggle that a lot of my clients have in building their business. You have to be found. You want to be known for your expertise. So you got to be found. So you got to play the game, right? To be found electronically, because it's not going to probably happen in your local life, right? Your clients are going to be elsewhere, and it's getting trickier and trickier, and it's a moving target. And so, think about the hundreds and thousands of young people out there across the world who spend a lot of their mental energy and creative energy figuring out how to be more visible on a platform like Instagram. What if that creativity and mental energy was put elsewhere, right? It's like the professor made this analogy to colonialism. It's like we're serfs in someone else's kingdom, right?
Yeah.
And then they change the algorithm, and then, oh, what happened in my business model? And so right now it's just top of mind for me, and I'm looking into that. So it's but that is more or less the path you have to take. So, invest up front to have the technical part right. And if you're not a technical person, I would say, make sure your website is SEO optimized so you at least can be found that way before all the search moves to AI, and then figure out how it's going to work in AI. Like, I personally, when I want to find something out, I don't ask Google anymore. I ask AI. I get a much better result.
Well,
So
my understanding too about AI is that it can only give us information that we've given it. In other words, there's this file cabinet, and we give access to AI to that file cabinet. Whatever's in there is what it's going to use to give us an answer to our question or what have you. I want to
but
talk a
that's
little.
not 100% correct,
Okay,
because it mixes, like, to continue with that imagery, it takes the files, it pulls out the manila folder, lets all the sheets of paper fall to the ground, and then it scoops them up again, and and gives to you in a different mixture.
sure.
So that's the hallucinations. It comes up with stuff that is new by remixing what we gave it. So to say that it can only give us what we put out there is not correct. It does come up with new stuff. It's a huge calculator for words, and it is calculating the proximity and the chance that this word occurs next to this word. And I can share with you, for your readers, a nice link to an FT page that really explains how a large language model works. And it shows like a sentence and how that sentence is turned into numbers, then how it's calculated with the likelihood that this word is going to come next to this one. And that's what's behind it all. So I
Mhm.
think that that
We can talk about that. I definitely want to continue that conversation. Ray Wessel's my guest, and we're having a fascinating conversation. I hope that you will stay with us as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, along with Ray Wessel, and Ray. We're getting into an area that I am not having a lot of fun with, and that is AI. Here's the question: I want to write a book. I want to write a fiction, and I want to tell a story. And I'm going to sit down at the computer in this case, as opposed to the stone tablet and chisel. And
yeah.
I am going to, from my own mind and my own imagination and experiences, I'm going to write down this story.
Okay.
Now, who's the author? Who holds the copyright? Who is the owner of that story? Well, the obvious answer is me. I did it. Now I go to AI. I say, I want to write a story about, I want it to be fiction. I want there to be a protagonist. I want this character, that. I give the parameters. Write me a 300-page story. I don't know if that how that works, but nonetheless. And it cranks out a story. Who's the author? It's not me, because I didn't write it. At least that's my perspective. Now, to the listener or viewer of Tell Me Your Story who said, Richard, you need to open your mind. Ray, open my mind.
Okay. I'm going to have to pass on that question to the lawyers, and I know that it is a quickly changing subject. I
Yeah.
was at a conference recently where we were talking a lot about AI, and there was an expert. I spoke to him in the morning, then the conference continued, and then there was an evening dinner for the other speakers. He and I were both speakers, and then he said something in the evening and it was different from what he had said in the morning when I talked to him. And I asked him, did that change since I last talked to you? He said yes, because um, and so that's how fast moving it is. And I don't want to hop in there because that is not my area. But the copyright lawyers and IP lawyers are tackling that.
Yeah.
And I think there will need to be uh, clarity on that and clarity on that. Soon I have been told that when you upload a new book to Amazon, um, Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, that now you're asked, how much or, did you use AI and how much? And you have to do some disclosure on that. And so you probably heard that already quite some time ago. Google changed its rules. At first, they were going to penalize you for using AI in your writing. And now they say they want human-like writing and it's got to be quality and serve the reader, right? Because it's in many cases, what the AI produces is much better than the average writer can write.
Well, then are we saying then that AI is a better writer than some of the classics like Stranger in a Strange Land, Ulysses, and we could go through a litany, a library full of classics. Is that what they're saying? Is that if AI existed 100 or 1,000 years ago with these writers like Socrates and Plato, that AI would do a better job?
I don't think that that's what people are saying, and I don't think that that's the case. And writing is the process of getting clarity,
Mhm.
and writing is thinking on paper. And
Oh,
and so when you are working with an AI tool, I think you're becoming more of an editor than a writer. And you need to make sure that you're still getting that thinking, step in there, right? And the editing skill set is definitely thinking and really important, but it's different than the writing. And Richard, that you can ask the AI to write in the style of the masters and it knows how to replicate that. But it's not the same
okay.
and it's not it's and it's I don't want to say it will never be the same,
Mhm.
um, but it's what meant when I made that comment was that for the average writer doing copywriting for the business or writing some articles for the business, the AI is going to most likely give you a cleaner, nicer result.
And the only way AI can write in the style of, let's say, Plato or Socrates or Shakespeare is if AI has access to those writings so that it knows what the style is, right?
That's right. And I assume that all the classics have been fed into all of the LLMs because they are no longer copyright protected. And we know that many of the LLMs also took copyrighted material as well, but that's in the open source arena. So I haven't experimented with that, but I know that you can in your prompt say that this needs to be written in Shakespeare's language and it can deliver that.
Yeah.
So
Well, how about throwing this one in there? Well, this will irritate a whole bunch of people, Ray. That'll
get
irritate
ready,
them.
Vince. It's going to irritate you. Get ready.
I want to write what I refer to as an ancient wisdom teaching book. I
Hmm.
want to do it. I want AI to rewrite the Bible.
Oh, interesting.
Boy, that's gonna, and that's what's interesting that I have found fascinating over the years. Now, I worked in the 80s and early 90s for a Christian radio station. 15 years I was there. I have a collection of probably, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 different versions of the Bible. And I'm now hearing today, and I've seen some documentaries. In general, I'll tell this, where they're speaking about a particular concept. I'll even say death. All right. So now they're going through and they're finding all of the passages from the old and the new, and they're putting it together and saying, well, actually, that word means blah, 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 blah. And so, really, what's going to happen is blah, 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 which is contrary to everything that not only I, but most people were taught about death and what happens after death.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I couldn't even watch the rest of the documentary because it made it depressing. But here was the thing the conclusion I came to. I'm going, so what you are telling me is that for the past 2,000 years, maybe hundreds of different versions of the Bible have been translated from the original languages, stating in so many words that this is what death is. And now you in the 20th century, 21st century, the 2020s, are telling us that they were all wrong and you're right. And more specifically, one of the commandments, thou shalt not kill. Oh, now they're saying it really means thou shalt not murder. It was mistranslated. I'm going, again, the same statement. For 2,000 years, everybody else has been wrong except you. Now, don't get me wrong. If that is correct, if what they're stating in the present is correct, that's great if that's correct. But that's one of the issues that I have, for example, translating from one language to another. And I did a not a real in-depth study on this. You might know better about this, just be from your journalism background and the journalism work. I shouldn't say background. Hebrew. Every letter has its own legend, kind of like a map. You see all those little characters, and each one represents something. Well, in Hebrew, each of the 22 letters of the alphabet has a legend, a color, a number, a vibration, etc. A story. You start putting those together, it creates a new story into words into sentences, another story, sentences into paragraphs, into chapters, into a book. The moment you translate from Hebrew out into any other language, you lose that legend. It does not have the same meaning that it has. And I'm sure you've run into that over the course of time when you've had to deal with foreign languages where, I mean, you can do this now with Google or probably AI. Please define for me falche, which is Gaelic for welcome. All right. And you may go to, I've got Merriam-Webster on my now it probably wouldn't define it, translate it into English, but I'm sure I could get an Irish dictionary or converter, if you will, to tell me what that word means. My wife and I, when we leave a conversation, we leave the room, she goes one way, I go to work or what have you. In addition to telling her I love her, I say, Slan Gefal, which is good health until we meet again. And, and again, there might be other people who will translate that a little differently, especially those who do speak Gaelic, because I may be wrong with the definition. What about that aspect of getting the language right, and maybe not just translating from one language to another, but we even have a problem with English in communication because blue means you're wearing a beautiful blue colored jacket. But someone else may say, oh no, that's periwinkle, or that's sky blue, or that's blah, blah. And I guess I'll do it from the context of dealing with AI. How do we deal with that aspect of this whole storytelling and communicating our message?
I have to think about that. So I wasn't sure what the question was. I think that communication is in and of itself really, really difficult, even for people who are committed to a relationship and working on that and so forth. And in the business communications, PR world, they often say communication is not what you say, but what is received, right? So you have some responsibility for that, what you're describing, that problem, that it's going to be lost in translation, to think of the film, right? Even in the same language, some of the meaning and intent is lost in translation. And I think this would apply to even couples that have been together for years and years and years, and intensely and communicating well, but 25 years in, you still have potential for basic misunderstandings. And so I like that business communicators approach is like, we need to be aware that the receiver might not receive what we thought we sent. And what can we do? What measures can we take and responsibility can we take, to ensure that our message was sent the way it is? And now with social media and fast moving media and everyone and their dog being a publisher and creator and so forth, then it's all moving way too fast. And I used to work for Dow Jones in the newsroom, and that was before the internet. But everything was moving very fast because we had the stock tickers, and then the press releases would come, and you had to call up the traders, and this, that, and that was professionals trying to manage that, and now we have people who are not trained as professionals, basically working in an environment of multiple information impulses, trying to make sense of them. Emotions are heated. The algorithm favors posts that are sensational, that are if you've listened, or I listened instead of read, but Hariri's book Nexus on information systems. He's an Israeli historian, and I learned to my dismay that Facebook and Facebook's algorithm played a large role in the genocide in Burma, because there was not a news infrastructure. People were getting their information via social media. The algorithm favored the things that inflamed and were sensational, and then groups were allowed to publish hate speech, and that led to people dying. And I want to look into that more. And I bet some academics have been studying that. I want to see some definitive studies on that. but he is an academic himself. I was shocked to hear that. I was not aware of that, but also somehow not surprised. And so there's a disconnect between the companies making money off of hate speech, and the creators that we were talking about before, but also the consumers who who are having their emotions played with and may even act on that, and
Wow.
people die. And so I'm not exactly sure where I was headed, but maybe you can get me back on track.
Well,
It was the
actually, you
responsibility for what we communicate and how it arrives. Yeah. Also,
exactly.
now that I think about that example, so using that example, and if we were to take responsibility, right, then there's an additional player in that model that I just described, because now you have a platform amplifying something,
Right.
right? So taking the responsibility then becomes a different way, but that, the information, the news, the ideas that are not packaged in a sensational way, that are rational, that are asking you to slow down and consider this and understand it in context, all of that gets pushed to the bottom of the feed. And so it's we're living in interesting times.
It's interesting too because people will cite the First Amendment that I have the right to say whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want, to whomever I want, in whatever way I want. Except that the Supreme Court at one point, and this is the example that's used, ruled many years ago, you cannot yell fire in a crowded movie house, using even your example in that regard. Now, um, because the way I look at that is, okay, yes, to that aspect of freedom of speech, and at the same time, and you have a responsibility to deal with, if you will, the consequences of your speech. And that's one of the aspects of this in terms of the ethical aspects of not just speech, but even being a thought leader, because there are individuals down through our own history, let alone world history, who we could classify as thought leaders, but the thoughts that they were disseminating would match, let's just say, that your example of the massacre in Burma. They would disseminate what was has been referred to as the big lie. It's a lie. You know it's a lie, but the more you tell it and the louder you tell it and the more people you get to believe it, the more that lie becomes the truth. And that's one of those aspects I find rather interesting. And by the way, one of the other aspects you referenced the word copyright. I've always found it fascinating and a little bit bizarre in the music industry when individuals are suing one another because, well, he used 3 notes in his song that we have in our song. And I'm sitting here thinking, there's another way to look at that. You should be flattered that they heard your music. But even on a broader perspective, there is, in again, the ancient wisdom teaching I've referred to before, there is nothing new under the sun. And in one sense, and again, I don't want to take away anybody's livelihood by any means. That's not why I say this. But, the reality is that I've listened to, as we all have, all kinds of different music. And if I was a music creator, a regular songwriter, I might very well incorporate into my song a particular brief little melody, or maybe the phrasing of words that match another song lyrics, because there's nothing new under the sun. And well, you talk about, we use the example of that file cabinet and AI pulls all the pages out and rearranges them. Well, hey, you got the same situation with the dictionary. Okay, War and Peace is in the dictionary. Okay, it's there. So does who gets the copyright for War and Peace? Does Merriam-Webster or does the author? of War and Peace get it? Because War and Peace used the words from the dictionary. Are we going to have a lawsuit over that or any other work? That's kind of how crazy it gets. And that kind of goes to what you said earlier about leaving this up to the legislators and the lawyers.
Yeah, yeah. The I get what you're saying, but I think, the lawyers are looking at the derivative products that are close to what the masters wrote
Mhm.
or what, yeah, I think they're on top of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm glad that I don't, that I not, you know, having to deal with that thing. Well, what I would like to say though, to what
Please.
you said is literature is a conversation. Art is a conversation. Uh, Classical music is a conversation. So I would see that like you do with the person suing for a few notes being used. They should be honored. It's being inspired from what came before you and bringing in your own insights and experience and your own person and personality and
Mhm.
creating something new out of that with respect for all of those who came before you. And
Yeah.
there's the nice phrase, standing on the shoulders of giants. And scientists also see themselves this way. They're in a conversation and
Well,
they're
yeah. Well, they're building upon the work of their, if you will, ancestors in that realm,
Mhm.
in that arena, in that industry, if you will. By the way, I saw a couple of videos, Paul McCartney in particular, younger Paul McCartney, who was talking about, and I can't remember which song he was referring to of the Beatles, but he was listening to this classical piece of music, and he heard these three, four, five notes, and he reversed them.
Mhm, mhm,
He played them, if you will, backwards, and
mhm.
those five notes were the impetus for that particular song. You know, I wonder if someone did that today with a more modern song and took the first five notes of, I don't know, Hotel California and reversed them, if they would be sued because they used those notes, but they used them in sequence, but in reverse. You have to, because it wouldn't have been recognizable to me unless someone told me. I just find those kinds of conversations interesting. We're talking with Rhea Wessel, and we're talking about becoming a thought leader writer, if you will. She's the founder of the Institute for Thought Leadership. Instituteforthoughtleadership.com is the website, which we will be linked to. And we ask you to stay right where you are because we're not quite finished yet here on Tell Me Your Story. Rhea Wessel's my guest here on the program, and we are talking about writing like a thought leader, how to find a constant stream of story ideas to position yourself as a go-to expert in your niche. You have, let's just deal real quickly here because I know we're getting short on time. Maybe one or two of the first steps that we need to take. I would think one of them would be to go to the Institute for Thoughtleadership.com. All right, that would be an excellent way to go.
Sure, please swing by.
Please. But what would be the first one or two steps that you would guide someone in to begin this process?
Mhm. Yeah, I would say finding your thought leadership niche, which we talked about earlier, framing the stories, and then really looking at how you're going to maintain momentum and a publishing cadence with your ideas and getting out there, right? So consider what kind of research you can commission and how you can help your uh, viewers, readers, audience, clients solve their problems. So one way we do that, and the training I do for companies and for Harvard alumni entrepreneurs and others, is we work with mind maps. So once you have identified one audience, because many people have multiple audiences, and people in the B2B space selling into companies, they might have a buyer and a beneficiary of their service or product. So those are two different audiences. You've got to nail it down to one audience and one problem that you know a lot about and care a lot about. And so in my book, I show some of these mind maps based on my own subject matter of thought leadership. So I just started at a higher level mind map, like what are some of the problems of thought leadership writing? And when people are trying to write in this style, well, maybe they have the wrong angle, or they have a bad angle, or it's just boring. They're coming out saying, digital is here to stay and your company needs a digital transformation. We're like, gee, well, we know that. We still need to know a lot more about it because it's not always working. But that
Right.
was a story about 30 years ago. Do not write me a story like that, right? So that would be a old framing or poor framing. Maybe the writing is, boring to tears or too technical. So I mapped out all these problems, and that's so much fun to generate these lists and ideas. Then I drill down on one of those problems and take that to a fresh mind map and start looking at that audience. So what I used as an example, subject matter experts who are writing about their work. They get the wrong angle and then they lose the attention of their readers. And I work for a lot of consulting companies, and I was asked to edit the articles written by a team of subject matter experts. So you have 6 consultants who know a lot, and they spend their weekends and evenings writing an article, but it has a very academic setup to it, right? And it doesn't have a hook that gets the reader in, a hook like a journalist would use and stuff like that. And I would get these articles, and then I would look at it and it's like, oh, seen it, heard it, know it, okay, know it, know. Oh, that's interesting. Way down here. Let's kick all of this out, move this up here, reframe the article, and then you have a really interesting story. And so I would have to go on calls with these teams of experts and get their buy-in before I massacred their article. And so I realized that I was actually taking them through the journalistic framing process and convincing them, look, that's what's interesting. You've got to build on that. And that's how I came up with the story framing system. And so back to your original question, finding your niche, framing your stories, then you've got to flesh them out, which means write them in a way that is accessible, that's using the journalistic toolkit. And
Yeah. So if I was to throw out, okay, my niche is I want to change the world for the better for everyone. Little too broad. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have to hone that so far down from the giant log that it is down to a grain of sand before I could even begin, because I'd need to be extremely specific as to exactly what I meant by that. Because
right.
Better is different for each. This goes back to the communication issue. Better is different for each individual. What is better? A better world for you is different as far as a better world for me. It reminds me of a gentleman here in Santa Barbara who had a company, a nonprofit called A Year Without War. And of course, a lot of people they loved to use the word peace. He says, no, because everybody's got a different. He says, what would a year without war look like to you as the individual? And he put it on the individual and said, what would that look like to you?
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of goes to what Gandhi said about being the change you want to see,
mm-hmm.
or having the peace within that you want to see in the world, that kind of thing. So, boy, there are a lot of different aspects to this, but boy, it can be beneficial in a lot of different ways. It could even be beneficial financially, but in terms of our clarity, and I have this funny feeling that, a matter of fact, my mother, I love her. She's in her 90s now, and she read my book. And first of all, in a text, she said, "Congratulations," and then she offered a couple of suggestions. Mm-hmm. Number one, that next time, the next book you write, not this one, but the next one you write, make sure that you have an editor and a proofreader. Not that it was horrible, but that obviously she saw some things. But always remember, whether this is financially beneficial to you or not, you wrote and published your first book. And I have stories in there. And that's one of the keys that you've been talking about throughout this program about storytelling. We all have stories. This is where, to me, there's a separation between the human. Maybe this is where the editing comes in from AI, where now I've got to inject a personal story that is of meaning, that is of impact, that is maybe of inspiration to the reader, uh, within the context of what AI has put together for me. And that's when that writing, I'll use that broad term, becomes the human author's writing from that standpoint. Because now I have woven myself into all of those words. And again, I'm not taking a legal stand. I'm just saying that to me would kind of better define who the author of that particular work is. Um, this has been a fascinating hour. I want to thank you for giving us so much time here on the program to talk about this. I hope that we have covered a few of the areas. We can never cover them all, but it just seems like a great idea to help our listeners and viewers, myself included, to be a better storyteller. I know that I have to work on my elevator pitches because mine are more like long commute pitches, and I'm working on it. But thank you so much for being a part of it.
Yeah.
I do have three final questions that I want to ask you that I have asked all of my guests. But before I do, I want to thank you for listening to and watching. Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. Podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. We're on YouTube where you can listen to and watch these conversations. I hope you'll subscribe and click notification. I want to remind you that the book Choices, 5 Steps for Life is available on Amazon in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle with Audible soon to come. And we also ask if you can support the work that we are doing financially. We have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And there are links to both of those sites, Amazon and PayPal, at richarddugan.com, right there at the top of the page. So I hope that you will take advantage of those. And finally, we ask during this decade of perfect vision that you spend some time going within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with all of that, we move to our final three questions for a very special guest. The first of those is, who is Rhea Wessel?
Oh, no.
And no, you can't ask AI.
I can't ask AI, yeah.
No, or Google.
I'm someone who really wants to have a positive impact and help subject matter experts get out there with their best ideas. I'm someone who wants to see a constructive public discourse to solve big problems. I'm someone who believes that we already have most of the solutions that we need. They are just probably stuck in some expert's head, right? We have no lack of creativity and solutions to the big problems out there. So that's who I am.
What gets you up in the morning?
Doing that work. Doing that work.
And finally, what was your best day?
Today's a pretty good day. Today is a really good day. And I was at a co-working space recently in Houston, and when you walk out the door, it said, "Today it was a good day." And I was like, I need a sign like that in my office. Today was a good day. And I want to say that today was a really good day. Best day. Well, I can remember a few, but they don't fall in the context of this conversation. So I'm going to nominate today.
Well, and we thank you for allowing us to be within your best day and part of what the work that we are doing here. And then we're kind of doing the same thing, just a little different niche, as you like to say. So once again, thank you so much for being with us, and I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. And until our next broadcast, podcast, video cast, love to law. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Mike, thanks for letting me be in your life. Doug, I will see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.